The night my grandmother called my mother into the courtyard, the wind stood unnaturally still, as if the world itself was holding its breath to listen. I remember watching from behind the half-open kitchen door, the yellow bulb flickering above their heads, my grandmother's shadow trembling against the cracked wall like it was afraid of what was about to be said. She spoke in a low voice, almost a whisper, but her words cut through the silence with surgical precision. "You must tell her the truth," she said. That was the moment my life quietly began to unravel. I was 28, educated, working at a private firm where ambition was rewarded with exhaustion and silence. On paper, my life looked respectable. An office job, a decent marriage proposal in progress, a dutiful daughter living under her mother's roof. But inside me lived a woman who felt like a stranger in her own skin. I had learned early how to swallow discomfort, how to smile while my chest burned with questions no one answered. My grandmother's whisper felt like a threat to the fragile order I had constructed around myself. My grandmother, Amie John, had always been a woman of few words and heavy eyes. She carried secrets the way other women carried jewelry, close to the skin, never flaunted, but always present. That night, her back was bent more than usual, her dupatta pulled tightly around her shoulders, as if she were bracing herself for a storm only she could see. My mother stood stiffly in front of her, arms crossed, jaw clenched. I had never seen fear on my mother's face before. Authority was her second skin. I didn't hear the whole conversation, but I didn't need to. The way my mother's face drained of color told me everything I needed to know. Something old, something buried, something dangerous had resurfaced. Later that night, my mother called me into her room. She sat on the edge of the bed, smoothing the bedsheet repeatedly, a nervous habit she had abandoned years ago. I noticed then how tired she looked, how small. "Your grandmother worries too much," she said without looking at me. "She lives in the past." Her voice was sharp, defensive. I nodded, though something inside me recoiled. Over the next few days, strange things began to happen. The marriage proposal my mother had been aggressively pursuing suddenly stalled. My fiancé, polite, distant, chosen more for convenience than love, stopped calling. At work, my supervisor reassigned my project to a junior colleague without explanation. I felt invisible, disposable, like a shadow passing through other people's decisions. Each night, I replayed that courtyard scene in my mind, the whisper that refused to leave me alone. One evening, I found my grandmother sitting alone, shelling peas with slow, deliberate movements. I sat beside her, the unspoken weight between us thick and suffocating. "What did you tell Amie that night?" I asked quietly. Her hands paused mid-motion. She didn't look at me. "Some truths wait years for air," she said softly. "But when they rise, they change everything." I felt anger flare in my chest. Truth about what? About me. My voice trembled despite my effort to stay calm. She finally turned to me then, her eyes sharp despite her age. "About the price women pay when others decide their lives for them." Her words haunted me. I began noticing things I had ignored all my life. The way my mother controlled every major decision, the way my opinions were tolerated but never respected, the way my career was treated as a temporary distraction until marriage. I started questioning my past, my choices, my silences. And the more I questioned, the more cracks appeared in the version of reality I had been taught to accept. One night, unable to sleep, I searched through an old wooden trunk in my grandmother's room. Beneath faded shawls and yellowed letters, I found a document that made my hands shake. A hospital record, dated nearly 3 decades ago. My name was on it. But the woman listed as my mother wasn't the woman who raised me. Footsteps echoed outside the room. I heard my mother's voice calling my name. I clutched the paper to my chest, my heart pounding as I realized the whisper in the courtyard wasn't a warning. It was a confession waiting to explode. The document burned in my hands like it knew it wasn't supposed to be found. Name. My date of birth. And beneath it, a woman's name I had never heard before. My breathing turned shallow as my mother's footsteps grew closer. In that moment, I understood something fundamental. Whatever my grandmother had told her that night, My mother had been running from it ever since. I slipped the paper back into the trunk just as my mother entered the room. Her eyes scanned my face, sharp and suspicious. "What are you doing here so late?" she asked. "I couldn't sleep," I replied, forcing calm into my voice. She studied me for a second longer than necessary, then turned away. That night sleep never came. My thoughts spiraled, dragging me through memories that suddenly felt staged, rehearsed. The next morning, I confronted my grandmother. There was no anger in my voice this time, only exhaustion. "Who is she?" asked. "The woman in the papers." My grandmother sighed, a long, tired sound. "Your real mother." The word real echoed inside me like a gunshot. She told me everything then. How my biological mother had been my father's first wife, a woman too outspoken, too independent for the family's liking. When she became pregnant, tensions rose. After my birth, she was declared unstable, unfit. I was taken from her arms and given to my father's second wife, my mother, the obedient one, the acceptable one. And she agreed. I asked bitterly. "She was told it was her duty," my grandmother said. "Just like they told me to stay silent." The betrayal cut deeper than I imagined. My entire identity had been shaped by lies, by choices made without my consent. I felt robbed, not just of a mother but of truth. When I confronted my mother later that day, she didn't deny it. She didn't apologize either. "I raised you," she said coldly. "That should be enough." Her words ignited something dangerous inside me. For the first time I spoke back. I questioned her authority, her control, her right to manipulate my life. The argument escalated, years of resentment pouring out like floodwater. She slapped me. I didn't cry. That night I packed a small bag and left. Freedom was terrifying. I moved into a tiny rented room near my office. The walls thin, the silence deafening. At work I fought harder, spoke louder, refused to disappear. When my supervisor tried to sideline me again, I confronted him calmly and documented everything. For the first time, I realized power didn't always come from shouting. Sometimes it came from refusing to be erased. I tracked down my biological mother after weeks of searching. She lived in a modest house on the edge of the city. Her hair streaked with gray, her eyes haunted. When she opened the door and saw me, she didn't ask who I was. She knew. She cried as she held my face, whispering apologies for a life stolen from both of us. I felt grief and relief collide inside me. But healing wasn't immediate. It was messy, painful, incomplete. Just as I began rebuilding myself, new job offer, growing confidence, fragile peace, my mother showed up at my door. "I need your help," she said, her voice shaking. Behind her eyes was fear I had never seen before. And in her hand was a legal notice with my name on it. The past wasn't done with me yet. The legal notice trembled in my mother's hand, but I refused to take it immediately. I had learned that power often hid in pauses, in the space where fear expected obedience and found resistance instead. She looked smaller than I remembered, stripped of authority by desperation. "They're challenging the property transfer," she said quietly. "Your father's family. They say you have no legal right." I laughed, a sound sharp and unexpected. "So now the truth matters." Yes. The irony was almost poetic. The same people who had erased my identity now needed it to protect their wealth. I read the notice carefully, every line a reminder of how systems were built to serve those who controlled the narrative. But this time the narrative was mine. I sought legal counsel, digging deeper into records my grandmother had helped preserve. Her silence, it turned out, had been strategic. She had kept documents, letters, proof. "I waited," she told me one evening, her voice steady, "for you to be strong enough." The case dragged on, exhausting and emotionally brutal. Relatives I barely knew emerged from nowhere, questioning my character, my legitimacy, my worth. At work, the pressure mounted, but so did my resolve. I earned my promotion not through sympathy, but competence. Each small victory stitched a piece of myself back together. When I finally stood in court, I wasn't afraid. I told my story clearly without theatrics. I spoke of stolen identity, of women silenced for convenience, of the cost of obedience. The judge listened. So did my mother, tears streaming silently down her face. The ruling favored me. Outside the courthouse, my mother approached me slowly. "I was afraid," she said. "I thought if I told you the truth, I'd lose you." "You lost me the moment you chose the lie," I replied gently. "But I found myself because of it." Reconciliation wasn't immediate, nor complete. Some wounds don't close neatly, but they teach. Months later, I moved into my own apartment. I helped my biological mother start a small business. My grandmother passed away quietly one morning, her final gift resting heavy in my chest, the courage to speak. Sometimes I return to that courtyard in memory, to the whisper that shattered my life and rebuilt it stronger. I understand now. It wasn't about revenge alone. It was about reclaiming the right to exist on my own terms. And as I stand on my balcony at night, city lights flickering like possibilities, I realize something profound. The truth doesn't just free you, it arms you. And once armed, a woman is unstoppable.